And then all of a sudden it was the last day.
The last day is our final day that we had to head back to Melbourne.
I think some of us had been up rather late, just checking out some of the nightlife. A couple of crazy people got up early for a run.
But we still wanted to have that extra bit of time to go and explore in the market.
There was a couple of patterns that had emerged as the tour had gone on. We'd all wake up in the morning, we'd all go to Starbucks and grab a coffee, we'd all jump on a bus. We'd go on a tour, we'd have lunch, we'd go on a tour, we'd get back and try and get to the electronics market as quickly as possible.
At any point possible, as soon as we got back to the hotel, people were off to the markets to go and buy things. So there was this frantic energy in trying to get as much purchases as possible.
Going back to the electronic markets for one of the final times we could go there was definitely a bit of a rush.
Although we'd been there for 8 days, because so much of that was packed with factory tours, I don't feel like I had the time to do the markets justice. So I will definitely be going back again.
Some of them are already in the markets that day.
It was a mad rush to have breakfast and get to the market.
The clock was ticking. We all knew when we had to convene back to get to the bus.
Madhouse. I mean, it's like a Black Friday sale.
One unfortunate thing is the market's open somewhere between 9 and 10, but nothing really starts. All the stalls aren't open until 10:30.
Everyone's tour experience has things that are in common and things that are a bit different. I know some people are very keen to do more shopping and do some more bits. Maybe they'd seen some other things that people have got, particularly SP32s, and want to do the same, and so there was a bit of a rush to find those vendors. I'd usually travel heavy and bring too much stuff, and so this tour I travelled light and didn't buy a whole lot and came back under the luggage limit. So I was more of an observer of the last minute dash for bits and trying to squeeze on bags.
Everyone was running all over the market and WeChat was going off. People saying, I'm at this counter and I found this or I found that.
You know you want everything, but you haven't got time. The shops are shutting. It's just hectic.
We had limited hours that day because we had to check out of the hotel by 2.
Early in the tour, when it kind of dawned on us how extensive the electronics market was and how much we wanted to see, there was this kind of, real desperation to try and see as much as possible, and I think that was acutely felt in the last day.
People looking for specific components.
People had ordered custom parts and were waiting to pick them up.
And you're trying to go through the checklist that you've made of all the parts that you've seen over the tour, all the things that other people have bought.
I bought a lot of LEDs, I bought ESP32 kids sensors to go with their breadboards.
I bought a whole bunch of solenoids that I'm going to play with. Picked up the LED strips that I'd ordered the day before.
Fairy lights and LED controllers and a few other bits and pieces.
And just going through and trying to find all the parts for the best price and running back and forth between stores, seeing which one would get you the best price.
By this stage, we kind of knew what was there and what we wanted, so it was really bargain hunting time.
So we're all kind of like trying to somewhat stay together in small groups, group by the things we were buying, and then try and figure out how to get to all the stores we wanted to get to before the end of the day.
Yeah, I was running around trying to get last minute gifts as well.
Finding last minute souvenirs.
It was kind of a good communal effort. We put our best bargainers forward, we pooled our resources, we ordered multiple items. It was really fun.
Then raced back to the hotel.
When packing, and there were strict guidelines on what can we take, what we can't take.
When you go there, figure out how to ship stuff out at the start of the week.
Shipping was, the box idea might have worked well.
One of the big problems on the last day in Shenzhen for pretty much everybody that visits is how to get all of the goodies back home.
I had packed very light, very deliberately on the way there.
If you're coming to Shenzhen, you are a light packer. If you're not, figure out how to be a light packer. Maybe think about putting a second suitcase inside your first suitcase.
I think I'd packed 10 kilos in my bag and there was a 23 kilo limit and I came out at 22 kilos. I think my biggest weight was LEDs. I think I must have had like 6 kilos of them.
And it's really common to see people going up the street to the market and buying an extra suitcase just to load it up with parts.
I bought another suitcase like Brian Gilbert bought, and that was a godsend. I didn't have a lot of weight, I just had a lot of volume. I bought a little quadcopter thing and I had to take all the rotors off it and package everything up properly.
So a lot of people turn up with just like a backpack or a small suitcase and they go home with 20 or 30 or 40 kilos worth of goodies that they picked up.
But it was very easy to rack up kilos very quickly.
China Southern gave us 2 bag allowances and 23 kilos apiece, not combined, split between the 2 bags, but 23 kilos each. So that's 46 kilos is sort of what you get usually out of a gold or first class bloody member's seat. So that's an awful lot of stuff you can bring back from Shenzhen. Good to know for next time. Next time I go over, I'm going to have a much bigger suitcase and fill them up. Bags of components. Because you don't buy stuff in 1s or 2s. You don't even buy 5s. You buy 50 of everything.
And then we packed right to the last kilo of the 23 kilos.
Having that extra space allowed me to wrap clothes around everything and stop everything from getting smashed up on the plane. That was a godsend. If I hadn't have bought that bag, I'd have had to leave stuff behind.
Trying to repack to get ready to go on the plane. It was a lot more stuff than I anticipated.
Packing up our suitcase was a bit like 3D Tetris, trying to fit everything in and stay underneath the weight limit.
You know, we had trouble fitting it in our suitcases by the time we finished, and it was totally the opposite of what I intended to do, but it was fun. So in the foyer of the hotel, people were sitting with their suitcases open and a set of luggage scales, and we were going around saying, oh, you're right on the limit, can I take like 2 kilos out of my case and put it into yours?
It was pretty funny seeing how much stuff we'd collected over the tour. But I did have to help other people with a bit of other stuff.
So everybody was redistributing all of the parts and trying to get all of the cases under the weight limit before we went home.
We definitely bought way too much stuff, but it really helps with making in future projects.
Then we had the rush to get all our suitcases into the bus,
And when we arrived, that was pretty easy. We just stacked our bags on a couple of seats at the front.
which took up far more space than they did when we arrived because most of us had a lot more stuff. So we were all kind of getting close to being squashed in the back of the bus rather than being spread out a seat each.
Everyone's, I guess, a little bit worn out, a little bit sort of, oh, we're about to jump on a plane for 10 hours. It was a bit of a, I guess, this sort of surreal sort of in-transit sort of feeling as we got on the bus.
Getting back to the airport, it was actually a very interesting airport. It was quite new, and all the infrastructure there was really interesting.
It was really sad to say goodbye to Timmy, who had been our interpreter for the trip, because we just spent 8 or 9 days with her and she'd been showing us around and headed back in through customs. So we had lots of suitcases to wheel through.
And the process of getting our bags all checked out and onto the plane was smooth for most of us.
My suitcase did get asked to get taken to another area and checked. I'm still not sure why. Didn't understand the translations going on there. They asked if I had electronics in my suitcase, and I'm pretty sure most people coming out of Shenzhen have some electronics in their suitcase.
And yeah, so we headed off back to Australia.
Or get onto the plane, I guess. It was sad, but good to go get back with our families.
And clearly, left Shenzhen.
Yeah, I was a bit sad to leave, but you know, I'm pretty sure we're all looking forward to going back to Shenzhen again.
I think the first thing I came back with that really reinforced it after visiting China is how important it is if you're running a hardware startup to make something. It doesn't matter if it's perfect, it doesn't matter if you're not an electrical engineer or any type of an engineer. You can Google, you can ask, you can engage in the maker space. If you make something that's so powerful, that's probably, you know, the biggest step, and the steps afterwards are much smaller.
Even though I'd already been dealing with Chinese factories, I still find it intimidating. Quite often I would be thinking, how do I approach that particular factory, or how do I go about having this particular service provided? And this trip really demystified that. I think it would have provided an even bigger benefit for people that hadn't been before. It opened up many doors and just showed that if you want to have something manufactured, it really is achievable. These are the people you can talk to.
This trip has definitely demystified a lot of the manufacturing process, and just knowing how things are produced and how you go from that idea all the way to the end product. It's definitely cleared up a lot of misconceptions.
I think before I went to China, this process of manufacturing was something I felt like I had to give to somebody else because I didn't understand. And that's not necessarily just manufacturing in China, but it's also kind of manufacturing in Australia. Whereas now, after seeing how things are made, how things are put together, what's important, I feel like I can kind of control our manufacturing process because I kind of understand the series of steps that needs to be taken to get what we need at the end of it.
Now that I'm back from China, having all this knowledge and this experience of going there and seeing all this stuff, if someone does have an idea, I kind of have an idea of how you can get that from prototype to production, or even just from the idea to prototype. It's a really good experience and knowledge to have.
It was definitely worth doing. The Shenzhen Innovation Tour was an enormous success in my mind. I couldn't have got the appreciation that I've got about that whole environment without having done it face to face.
I think the tour was a screaming success.
Without a doubt, the tour was a fabulous success. I think greater than anyone expected.
China isn't a pie in the sky. It's really close and it's really accessible. Just the variety of different people that you can engage with. Somewhere out there is what you need, but you really need to be able to understand what you need first before you can go out and kind of make that jump, which is kind of back to my original point why making something is so important.
I'm sort of still reeling from it. I mean, it's put a lot of my sort of world views into perspective where I kind of go, the US is good at that, China's good at that. Actually, China's good at everything. They're not holding back at all. They're not saying, we'll let these people deal with this thing. China's progressing on all fronts, and it's spectacular to watch them engage with things like electric cars, but they're absolutely going out there and making everything.
You know, I was quite apprehensive before going to Shenzhen about being able to deal in a country where not many people speak English.
The language barrier is probably another one that people cite as a barrier to doing business in China. Really, that's a much, much smaller problem than people generally think it is. There's translate apps, there's interpreters everywhere. It's really not a problem.
Breaking down those perceived but not necessarily real cultural barriers.
So yeah, it was great fun, great people, learnt so much.
I think seeing that and having my perspectives realigned, even if that was all I got out of the tour, that would be worth it. Meeting the group, seeing all the factories and just getting it through my skull again how valuable those services are and that they exist and that you can go and deal with them is just a godsend. You can't. It's very hard to explain to people why that's valuable until you go and do it.
Rearing to go with the next project to see where I can take it in that environment. That's going to be the challenge, of course, is actually coming up with a worthwhile project to push into that arena.
It exceeded all of my expectations. While I had tried very hard to prepare for success, it was beyond expectation as to the kind of cohort dynamics that we had and how well the group got along. You know, the impromptu hackathon, the way that people were able to share their knowledge and those sort of things. It takes a lot of time and effort to organise factories to ensure that the tour is going to cater to a variety of experiences.
Seeing is believing, I think I know the capability exists, but the Australian manufacturers pale into insignificance when you start looking at volume assembly. It doesn't really occur very much in Australia, so to go and see how it's done, you really do need to get out of Australia.
I think the face-to-face, the immersion in the environment has a much bigger influence than people telling you about it.
It's very intense. The traffic is incredibly intense.
You have to smell it, you have to feel it, you have to be nearly run over a few times before you get the vibe of the place.
Just because you've got a green light, you do not walk. You look both ways to make sure some push bike or moped isn't going to mow you down. But there's activity all the time.
And the intensity of wanting to do business there, of the people that you deal with, that just want to do business, they just want to make things happen. You can't convey that.
Just from the first night we got there, I was able to catch up with John Bosher, a great friend, and we basically just got a couple of beers for like $1.30 each and just sat on the ramp at the mall at Seg, just looking around, and the city just never stops. It's activity that's in addition to all the manufacturing that goes on there. I think we saw Shenzhen in parts. Like there was the visits to the factory were certainly one part. We'd get on the bus in the morning, we'd see the factories, and we'd sort of look out the windows and we'd see different parts of Shenzhen, some of the world's tallest buildings, and there's LEDs everywhere, and it's opulence, and everything in the middle. It's certainly a mixed city. It's like, which is expected with such hypergrowth over the last 30 years. But it is modern. They just get on with doing things at a very high intense pace. So I don't think you can use one word or one sentence to summarise it.
You can get the quality, you can get the communication, and then you can get your products made, basically.
I would feel relatively comfortable working with pretty much all of the factories that we visited and feel like they would respect your IP.
One thing that was apparent from the tour is that the factories are quite different in terms of what capability they have, I guess what scale, what quality and costing.
So the factories were on a much bigger range than I thought they would be, and they were a lot more specialized. Obviously you went from the kind of the low small production to the really high production quality and quantity. That's a really interesting difference.
One of the things that was valuable in visiting so many factories was seeing the wide range of scale, quality. Wouldn't say that we saw anything that was low quality, but we saw some processes such as Hytera where the level of obsession with the quality was like nothing I've ever seen before.
They really are on the cutting edge of manufacturing, and that there is a real need for that. But at the same time, we're not going to see a disappearance in the people like HLH for a very long time, because they're meeting a very different need for manufacturing as well. So I think for the people who are scared that manufacturing is going to take over everything, when the technology for to make a factory like Hytera comes down, then someone like HLH will probably use it. But while that's not the case, then everyone else is probably safe for a while.
Surprisingly, with all the factories, not just the prototyping ones, I think they all felt like they would be very approachable. I think the main blocker to that is really knowing they exist.
Basically now, from what we've seen, is you have a huge range of suppliers to select from.
So having the opportunity to spend these 8 days going to factories, probably very good for the factories, because I assume that pretty much everyone on the tour would go to one of these factories first now, just because they know they've seen the factory already. I guess that shows why those factories are so open to having people tour their factory, because you're pre-qualifying yourself in the eyes of a potential customer.
Yeah, we saw a really wide range across the spectrum. So I could see firms that you'd use for in prototyping, firms you'd use for products where you're only going to sell a couple of thousand of them, and then ones when it's time to make the big step up, the serious partners, and they're all there.
They're hugely different, but they're going to, you need to find a manufacturing partner that's tailored to your needs, because they will be out there.
I don't really think you can do much else other than go on a tour like this. The only way to wrap your head around how the manufacturing is going to work, when you look at pictures of factories on the internet, that doesn't tell you anything. Going and seeing them operate and just learning how different they can all be, you don't just open the yellow pages and go, I want that factory. You need to know what your factory's going to do, how it's going to do it, what sort of capacity it's got. It's just, there's a whole world of complexity there that you don't see until you go to Shenzhen.
I can now see how doing prototypes and rapid turnaround could be done quite successfully remotely with China. But as I saw, especially with the LifeX product, having your own person on the ground and seeing the community they've built around hacks, having people on the ground lets you innovate so much more efficiently. Yeah, if I was bringing a product to market, I would either be on the ground or have someone on the ground in Shenzhen.
It really drove home the value of this tour, that we started to get an understanding of what the different types of factories actually are.
I think you'd be mad not to do this sort of tour, even if you're just interested in how manufacturing works.
I went into this trip expecting that it would be just the same as what I'd had in the past. Because I'd visited Shenzhen before, I thought it would just be another opportunity to look around the markets, which I'd already seen. It turned out to be far more than that. Because it was so organised and got to see so many interesting factories and hang around with interesting people, I think I got far more benefit out of it than I was expecting. I thought it was just going to be a good chance to buy some more parts. In the end, I came back with very few parts. I didn't buy much while I was there, but the real benefit that I got from it was seeing all of these different factories and meeting the people that were on the trip.
I certainly feel much greater confidence about working with a group of people and taking something to Shenzhen, or helping someone else take their product to market through Shenzhen. Yeah, I'd love to do that.
At the beginning of the trip, everyone knew one or two other people on it, but most of us were strangers to most of us. By the end, as we hopped on the bus and went back, everyone knew everyone. Everyone knows what projects people are interested in, hobbies, the side projects are. So we spent the bus trip, just talking about what we're going to do as soon as we get home.
We're sitting on the bus and it's about an hour to and from the factories, and fairly consistently you'd say, oh, I'm thinking about making X, and then you'd have like 5 people saying, have you thought about this? Why don't we go to the market and we'll buy this, and then we can try it back in the hotel tonight, and what about this? I'm like, oh yeah, that's such a great idea.
We're still talking on WeChat.
Finishing the tour here was really great because we'd just seen High Terra, and this is such a huge contrast to it, that it really hammered home the understanding that you can't paint everybody in China, in the Chinese electronics manufacturing, with the same brush.
If you're interested in making money out of your product, then supplier selection is critical. It's got to suit what you want to do and at the price you can afford. So you can actually go to the likes of HLH or Kaiwu or any one of those places and then get your board manufactured at seed. You will end up with a very professional product at a particular price is guaranteed and you can support.
I think if you kind of want to work in this space, you need to understand the realities of it, and realising that China is not a scary place where only big wigs from big companies can get things done. China is a place that can then meet your needs if you understand them. I think it was a fantastic tour. Not only have I met 11 people who I feel really comfortable calling and having a chat about electronics with, but also just having a better understanding of what manufacturing is.
Going to Shenzhen was without doubt a fantastic experience, something very memorable.
The tour was extremely valuable.
I'll be recommending to anyone who wants to build and sell product, or just anyone who's in hardware engineering, needs to make a trip to Shenzhen and just have their horizon broadened. I'll certainly be encouraging more people to do the kind of trip we just did. Hopefully get myself on 1 or 2 of them in the future.
And finally, I think we should all thank Vela for having the tremendous effort she put in to make this happen, and hopefully we'll get to do it again next year, because I know everyone really enjoyed it and got a lot from it.
Turns out Vela's a natural as a tour operator.
Vela's organisation, with the assistance of Andy, was fantastic.
I was fortunate to see the tour right from the beginning, really, from right through the process of Vela organising everything, having to deal with different needs, bring all the factory tour details together and so on. So it was really interesting to have seen all that.
Vela's incredible. She did such an incredible job. I think she picked people who were going to be contributors, who were going to really add something to the trip, and we all got along.
It was a great bunch of people, so I think she did a lot of work to make sure that the group would sort of gel together, and that succeeded.
A great group of people to travel with.
And then we went on the tour, so it was this very intense week. The people who came along were fantastic. Everyone got on. There was a variety of people, and just all the discussions on the buses and at dinners and lunches and breakfasts were fantastic.
But she also, I think the biggest thing that she did that really brought the value to the trip is she was able to curate it in such a way to give us an understanding of the breadth of Chinese manufacturing.
She did a great job of lining up some really interesting factories for us to visit.
Just looking at the itinerary before we left, it was so detailed, and just knowing exactly when and where we were going to have lunch and things like that.
The way she managed it and how gracefully she did it all was just incredible.
If you had a question or a problem, you could go straight to her and she'd know exactly what to do. And it really made the trip work, just having her organisation there.
Vela is an amazing person, okay? With that, and she knows that because I've told her before. I just cannot believe how well she organised this. I mean, if I'd done it, it would have been a disaster.
Like, logistically, it was so on point. There was nothing went wrong. It was incredible. Nothing went wrong.
Everything went like clockwork. Everything was well thought through. The planning beforehand, the get-togethers, the tour guides, everything was just like clockwork. It was amazing. So I know she was a little bit trepidatious about the whole thing, because plans are one thing and actual eventualities can be another. But in this case, it went like a dream.
She put together a fantastic tour, great use of her skills. Yeah, she understands manufacturing and she knows how to talk to manufacturers, and she's a great organiser.
So I loved the trip overall. If there was another one, I would definitely go on it.
I would 110% go again.
So if I had the chance to do it again, yes, I would do it again.
It's not one of these trips where you can do it once and then you think, oh, I don't need to go back and do it again. It's all the same thing. You could get just as much benefit out of doing it a second time.
The next time round, basically explore other places that we didn't perhaps get a bit further out, and see some other kinds of manufacturing facilities as well. I'd be kind of interested in seeing more towards final products.
Yes, so without a doubt, it would be great to do another Shenzhen tour.
So if Ella ever runs another trip with HardworX, I would definitely be there.
I really hope we can convince her to keep doing it. It's such an asset for Victoria that we have someone who can open up the world of Shenzhen and allow us bring those lessons home, which will ultimately be very good for Australian innovation.
Fortunately, we'll all stay in touch to a degree, and so it's not the end, but it was the end of a very intense week together. A lot of experiences that we'll shared with ourselves, and other people will hear this, but they won't. You had to be there, sort of thing.
Yes, we'd spent 8 days in China looking at different manufacturing sites, but there's still so much more to see. We certainly had not seen everything in our tour.
Well, now I'm back. I wish I had. I wish I had another day and another day and another day there. I definitely want to go back.
Now that the trip is over, I've found that I'm spending a lot of time thinking about the things that I saw and whether I can make use of that information in new products and new projects that I'm working on. What it's done is made me aware of a whole lot of new capabilities and possibilities. In the past, I might have had an idea for a product and not really known how to go about having it manufactured, and now I have a whole lot more confidence. It allows me to think, I have this idea in my head and I can turn this into physical reality, and now I have the steps in order to make that happen.
So one of the things that we wanted to do to wrap up the tour was to have a tour workshop, and that was just going to be an open community event so that we were able to have people who haven't come on the tour being able to come along and participate in that and have the tour participants share some of their learnings. Beyond that, I'm still thinking about what the next steps are and what we can do to keep that knowledge sharing going and to build more connections. So I'm not sure where to from here, whether I'd organise another tour, and if I did, whether it would be the same kind of thing. I guess it's more about absorbing still the learnings from this tour and then working towards what might the future bring.